Duskmourn House of Horror. Let's jump into this set and get you ready for your pre-release, but before I do, let's do a little bit of housekeeping, and I want to remind you that I will be participating in the streamer event put on by Wizards of the Coast. It's a great way to learn about the cards early before you go to pre-release and watch them in action. I specifically focus on Sealed. I do some drafts, but either way, it's really nice to always hear you guys talk in the chat and be able to interact back with you. I highly recommend it for preparing for your pre-release. Jumping into this set, let's cover a few of the key mechanics first. Starting off with rooms. Each room has 2 doors. When it's in your hand, you choose to cast one side of the enchantment room and unlock that door. If the spell resolves, the enchantment enters the battlefield with the door side that you chose to cast unlocked. That will trigger. Or if it's a static ability, it goes into effect immediately. The other side of the enchantment, the other door is locked. That ability does not trigger. Is not open. You can unlock it at sorcery speed, either in the same turn or on a different turn later in the game. Once the door is unlocked, it is unlocked. You'd have to re-lock a door before you could reopen it again. The only other way you could do it is if you bounced the enchantment, the whole entire room, back to your hand somehow. But yes, once a door is unlocked, you can't just keep paying to unlock the same door either. Despite that, rooms are still a complete value powerhouse. I like them a lot. I think they're going to perform very well, especially in Sealed. Don't overlook them in your builds. We're also seeing the return of Delirium in this set. Delirium refers to when you have 4 or more card types in your graveyard. Usually these are instant sorcery creature, and then you're looking to get an enchantment, a land, an artifact. In this set, I actually think it's quite easy to get an enchantment in your grave, so I think more times than not, Delirium is not too difficult to turn on, which is a nice roll into Manifest Dread. For Manifest Dread, you're going to look at the top 2 cards of your library. You'll put one of them face down as a 2/2 creature, and then the other one into your graveyard. If the card you put down that's a 2/2 creature is a face down creature, you can, in fact, turn it face up at any time for its casting cost of that creature. I expect Manifest Dread to play an important role to fuel graveyards for recursion and delirium value. Next, we have Survival. Survival just refers to at the beginning of your second main phase. If the creature with Survival is tapped, it'll do whatever the card tells you to do. Some good value here. It likes being paired with vehicles, convoke, other methods to tap your creatures. There's actually a really cool removal spell in the set that taps creatures, but these mechanics can be finicky, but really strong abilities attached to some of these. We'll get into more of those later, but that's Survival. Eerie refers to when an enchantment you control enters the battlefield. It doesn't matter how it enters the battlefield, but it needs to enter. When it enters, you do the thing that Eerie tells you to do. I think Eerie can be very good in this set, so look out for that. And then lastly, we have Impending. Impending is an alternative casting cost. When it enters, you'll put a number of time counters on it, depending on what the card tells you to do. As long as there's at least one time counter on it, it isn't a creature, it's just an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you will remove a time counter from it. Once there are no time counters on it, it will be a creature again and can attack and block. The plus side of doing Impending is that it will still get the ETB trigger when it enters, even if you cast it for the Impending alternative cost. So it's a way to get it out earlier and use your mana more efficiently early in the game. Here's a quick list of the archetypes in the format. I would take these with a grain of salt, because even within the color combos listed, there's multiple ways to win with those colors that don't involve what's listed there. And sometimes how it's listed here can be a little bit misleading. Example is white-blue says Eerie Tempo, so it's a enchantment tempo deck. Although I can agree that it's an enchantment deck, some of the win cons within that are mill out your opponent strategies. Some of the win cons in that are extremely aggressive beatdown strategies. Further, there's even another way to play this archetype where you can do a complete enchantment control strategy that's extraordinarily grindy. Even within that one archetype, we're talking about 3 completely different decks. Sure, they all have enchantments in common, but they all do incredibly different things. And that's why I think this format's going to be really interesting to draft and to do Seal with. Is it's just very diverse, very fluid, and even within the archetypes, different win cons. For instance, red-white aggro. I mean, there is an enchantment aggro deck, and then there's a 2 power or less matters deck within red-white. and you have to decide which one you're doing. Sure, you can overlap a little bit, but you might be doing one or the other. White-Black Reanimator has tons of lifelink, life gain, life loss win cons, so I don't even think you have to be playing Reanimator to be playing white and black. So yeah, I mean, just crazy archetypes that they listed here. And I also think there's some great 3-color builds in this set as well. There's a lot of overlap here where you can play multiple of these archetypes or variants within the same archetype, and it'll still perform really well. You just need to make sure that you're supporting your win con. And to do that, I'm going to dive into individual color analysis, and then we'll come back to the archetypes afterwards and kind of show how do I see these decks playing out. White has an extreme split within it. I definitely think Survival and Reanimator are the two lesser supported decks, but also have support within the two major ones. I would say most of White either wants to be doing 2 power or less, or enchantments. So you're either going to go small and wide, or you're going to go enchantment aggro. Both are aggressive, both are great, but they're looking for completely different cards to do so. One example of a white aggressive enchantment curve out would be turn 1 Scavenger into the grand entryway, and then you open the other door on grand entryway. You're swinging in with 7 power on turn 3. So if you're on the play, your opponent had time to drop 1 2-drop. It's crippling. If you can follow that up with any removal of your own, they're going to have to answer some things before they die, and it will be a very fast clock. White can also go into these 2 power or less wider board state builds where you're trying to build up attacks that also get life gain, take advantage of having a wider board state, take advantage of being able to keep drawing cards, keep playing small creatures, swarm the board. You know, and even if you are going wide, there are selective board wipes that you could work around in White to actually be able to play. There's also a handful of cards that are just good in any deck. Double Strike's always great. And the rares are pretty incredible. I like all of White's rares. It's got some decent removal. Some is better than others, for sure, in White especially. It's pretty clear that White has this plan of enchantments, small things, building up to bigger things in the end. Looking at Blue, I think Blue offers an extraordinary amount of card draw advantage. I didn't count how many blue cards draw cards, but it's a lot of them. Blue is adding great support in giving you card advantage in this set and offers a wide range of tempo plays. Blue has an emphasis on creatures not being able to be blocked, which goes great into an aggressive strategy. It wants you to be playing enchantments, and there's plenty of them, so I'm not so worried about its desire to have enchantments, specifically room-focused. The rooms are very good, so if you can start doing room strategies with some of the other ones and overlapping, blue's a great color to look to play in your seal pool. But it's not just a support color. Blue actually offers some really great mill-out win cons, where you're trying to mill out your opponent. It also has some really great self-mill strategies, some emphasis on flyers, 1 unplayable card, and some really off-the-wall win cons within the rooms, where if you have enough rooms, you win the game. So Blue has a range of win cons. It doesn't need the other colors to necessarily win, but it certainly does provide really great support, and if you're looking to get card advantage in a grindier game, Blue is where it's at. Black's a very interesting color in the set in that it has some really good removal, and it has some really great endgame win cons, especially if you're going reanimating from the grave, or if you're playing a very heavy black deck, near mono black deck. My problem with black is that the early game plays are lacking. There's a few really great early black creatures, but not a ton of them. So getting a concentration of them and the endgame win cons is not very likely in Sealed. I think you're going to have to look to your secondary color to get you through the vast majority of that early game, so you can have that late game play win con actually land on the board and you have time to do so. Black is definitely very grindy. It wants everything in the grave. It doesn't want to be casting these expensive, hard to cast cards from your hand. Discard effects, manifest, being able to put the card in the graveyard and also get a 2/2 on the turn that's a different card. These are things that you'll be looking for when you're playing black. All right, let's move on to red. Red has the burn. Man, does it have the burn. I mean, red has haste, direct damage, pretty good selective board wipes at its disposal. It's just an all-around really good color that supports any aggro strategy. I mean, full stop. It doesn't matter what color you're playing red with. There is an aggro build that wants red in it, and it does a good job of supporting it. The only thing you need to be careful about when you play red in this set is making sure that you're mindful of your deck composition. So if you're playing Delirium with your red, you need to be careful of how many artifacts you're putting in and enchantments so that you can make sure that you are reaching that Delirium in your grave as quickly as possible. Red has a lot of good manifest and enchantments and cards that care about enchantments, so make sure that you aren't ignoring the idea that red might want you to be playing a lot of enchantments as well. Further, red Steel and Sack is back, baby. I mean, in this set, it is a real thing. This card is really good, and there's a lot of sacrifice outlets to be able to combo this card with, and so you'll be able to sack the creature that you steal afterwards and also get the benefit. This is always a strong move. In this set in particular, this is going to be quite strong because the creatures you're stealing are potentially very good and very big. Moving on to green. Green is the ramp color and the fixing color in this set. If you want to play 3 colors, green is a good option to help ease that and make it feasible. Green has a wide range of support. I think green's at its best when it's mixing different archetypes together. So pairing Delirium with Self-Mill, pairing Manifest with Delirium, those kinds of cross synergies that you can find when you have green as one of your colors. You don't have to be doing graveyard synergies with green. You can go into the green-white survival deck. You just need to have specific rares to do that, specifically looking at vehicles or convoke. But I think more times than not, if you're playing green, you're going to be looking to manifest and fuel your grave and do things for Delirium or reanimation. Finally, for green, I think it's really important to remember that you should never underestimate a format where there's trample on a big creature that also has a format where double strike is easily obtained and death touch is also easily obtained. That is such a crippling combination that it's worth saying, if you're playing green, I'm looking to do a big trample-y thing that I ramped into that has double strike and death touch if possible. So just know that green big things is a fine win con strategy. Just don't get done in by the aggro by you being too slow. Let's get into some of the archetypes now in more detail, starting with white-blue. The white-blue signposts at Uncommon really show how we're trying to bring white and blue synergies together. The Tamer leans into 2 power, less creatures matter, while also still rewarding you playing enchantments. It's a nice bridge card between white and blue, and also brings in some of the other white win con strategies. The Inquisitive Glimmer rewards you for playing more rooms by not only decreasing enchantment spells, but also unlock costs. Really trying to bring a lot of the blue tempo, blue control that's found on enchantments into the strategy. White has some enchantment removal as well. Basically, these 2 cards really indicate how we're trying to mix the small creatures go wide, making them bigger through enchantments, tempo, control strategies, and putting them together. Although, if I'm completely honest, my favorite thing that you find in blue-white is definitely Nico. Nico is an absolute powerhouse in this set. I can't even begin to explain all the different ways to benefit any 2, 3, 4, 5 color build. The only way to flicker. Also remember that if you choose to flicker a manifest creature that's face down, it will come back to the battlefield face up. So lots of utility here, lots of really cool builds you can do with Nico. Nico is a really great reason to get into white-blue. I would highly consider even splashing. Moving on to the blue-black enchantment control deck. I really think the essential card here is Fear of Infinity. The Skull Snap is one of the few early black creatures that are able to block an aggro deck well and buy you time, and it also surveils to help get you those creatures in the graveyard that you want from black. So I do think it's an important creature, even though it doesn't look like a lot as a 1/4 flyer. Just as a blocker, it should buy you some time. Then Fear of Infinity does the same thing. It buys you time with lifelink and the fact that you can buy it back from the grave, so you're not losing value when you mill it, you're actually gaining it. Blue-black would be an extremely grindy build most of the time. I don't see a necessarily aggressive strategy that you can go with these two colors. The red-black sacrifice needs a lot of pieces to come together just right, but if they do, it's extremely strong. Sawblade Skin Ripper is a fantastic card. Not just an okay card, we're talking fantastic. I love cards like this. I think it's going to overperform. Menace on top of everything is great. There is a steal effect, so there are ways to combo against your opponents, but there's also enchantments that you can play that give you extra value for sacking them as well. So in general, red-black sack is pretty good. I worry about sacrifice fodder. I like this in Mardu, potentially, where you're making more tokens in red-white, so you'll have more sacrifice fodder, so maybe dipping into those three colors would be something I would be interested in Sealed, just to get enough sac fodder. But other than that, if you have the sacrifice fodder, it seems like a pretty cool build. Delirium red-green aggro is looking like a pretty good beatdown. I mean, normally these are pretty finicky, but I think with Wildfire Wickerfolk having haste and it being an artifact and a creature, if it trades off, it fuels 2 Delirium in and of itself on turn 2. So that's pretty good. There's also Manifest Dread, which will help you put more things in your graveyard and selectively choosing which one you want now versus later. The sorcery helps you attack in by letting you kill something off the board. So, I mean, in general, the signposts are good for any beatdown deck. I have a hard time placing green-white in its value for survival. I mean, obviously you want to be playing survival in this color. It is a vehicle deck, but there's only 2 vehicles in the format, and they're both rares. The fact that it has to survive combat in order to get its ability, or you have to find another way to tap the creature without it threatening getting killed, is pretty bad. I mean, let's just say it's pretty bad. And then even if it is surviving, right, and you tapped it some other way and it didn't have to go into combat, it's still tapped. You're not blocking. And there is, this white enchantment that untaps creatures, but again, it's rare. What are the odds of you having all these pieces together? Not too high in Sealed. I think the archetype has merit. It's just the amount of cards that are rare that you need to have to make it really shine is quite a lot. So you just have to open a perfect green-white seal pool if this is the one you want to play. White-black, I have issues with the name of Reanimator. Sure, there's a lot of reanimating, but I mean, Shroud Stomper's basically uncastable. Maybe unplayable. Is it strong? Fine. It's okay. I wouldn't call it good. No. I'm not happy to pay 7 mana for a 5/5 Death Toucher ever. If it goes to the grave, fine, but I'm still not happy to pay 4 mana to bring it back, So it's one of those cards where I'm like, I can't believe this is a signpost. It's weak sauce. I think white-black definitely cares a bit more about some rares having life gain, life loss, and enchantments, and I think those are the real white-black archetypes. I think, again, Mardu is a happy medium since white-red signpost attacks in and does damage and you gain life, so don't be afraid to look for cross synergies. Also, Abzan, Reanimator Abzan is perfectly reasonable. If you want to splash white to be able to get more reanimation in or better targets or a few more rares with your, green-black self-mill deck, I think that's reasonable too. So looking maybe to put white-black in Sealed, especially with something besides just white and black creatures. Of course, if you have small 2 power or less matters creatures in these 2 colors that happen to be a good curve out, I think it can be successful. The Rooms deck, blue-red. Again, Soul Rager, basically unplayable. It's a 2/2 vigilant creature that you're basically never going to activate unless you've already won the game. It's weird. The other signpost is a room itself, which makes sense, I guess. It's fine. Again, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I feel like it's lacking a little. I feel like I want to play, Grixis or Jeskai or Temur, something else to bring in blue-red rooms. And if I am playing blue and red together, there is a good deck there. But I think you have to be careful not to put too many rooms in that deck. It's going to be an enchantment, unblockable, direct damage deck. And it's good. I can see it. It's a burn deck that plays enchantment creatures, and it cares about enchantments, and it has ramp to play enchantments. And it's very aggressive, and it's very good. But I'm not necessarily playing copious amounts of rooms. It might have a few rooms to do burn spells and extra damage, but I'm not necessarily focused on only rooms. I'm definitely much more interested in the enchantment creatures that are doing damage or drawing me cards. The Delirium grind deck, black-green, looks pretty good, pretty strong. Brood Spinner looks decent. Drag to the Roots, great. The rares are okay in the colors. I think you're going to have to pull black's early game through with the green and really focus on ramp and self-mill and manifest. Definitely I'm going to be playing a lot of manifest if I'm playing a black-green deck, hoping to hit large creatures that I can cheat in or reanimate in. We touched on this earlier, but aggro red-white, the signposts are kind of misleading. They indicate that red-white should be a 2 power or less deck that goes wide, and you can also make gremlins that go wide, right? White-red has an amazing aggressive enchantment build as well that you could toss one of these cards in, but it actually would slow down your curve out and not be as good as playing just another enchantment and going extremely aggressive that way. So I think you can go either way with it. There are some board wipes that definitely support going smaller instead, but I do worry that this one's not as fast as the enchantment aggro build, so it might fall a little flat from the signpost point of view, even though they're individually strong cards. The Manifest Dread green-blue deck, I think most of the time you're going to be playing Soul Tie or Teamer if you're manifesting Dread, but it can stand alone as well. There's a lot of good card draw, some decent cross synergies. The problem with it is that it's finicky, and you ideally want to hit a creature off of the 2 looks you have. I think in this set, using it to feel your grave is probably a little bit more important. That's why I think a Teamer Delirium deck or a Soul Tie Recursion Reanimate deck is probably where it'll be happiest. There's a lot of lands in the set that are dual colored. How many you open in your seal pool is going to be hit and miss. Artifacts, there are some great artifacts here. Don't ignore those either. The Ghost Vacuum in particular can just destroy Delirium decks and Recursion decks. Marvin looks great. Even Dissection tools in a red-black sack deck look decent. Haunted Screen also, it's kind of cheesy, but if you have 7 mana and nothing else to do, it's not the worst card to have access to. And even cards that look kind of clunky and cheesy, like Conductive Machete, can be really good in a Manifest deck because it's kind of like for Mirrodin, where it self-equips and then it's just added value laying around later. Yeah, it's an expensive re-equip, but that's just bonus. What you're really getting is a 4 mana, 4/3, where you got to put a card in your graveyard to fuel grave and also get a manifest creature. So even though it has the expensive re-equip, it's still a good value for what you just paid and got straight up in the first place. On a closing note, just remember that this set is bomb heavy and has a lot of ways for your opponent to board wipe you or for you to board wipe your opponent in a selective way. So, maybe don't overextend to the board. Make sure you hold your removal for those cards that you just can't get rid of otherwise. Enchantment removal, premium. Make sure you have something. Just remember when you're building to focus on your win con and really make sure you're working towards that every single turn. If you're still listening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It takes 2 seconds, but it really helps my channel grow. Also, feel free to leave comments and questions below. I do answer my comments. I'm a small channel, so I do care about what you have to say, and I'll make sure to answer it as best I can before you go to your pre-release. Good luck, everybody, and I'll see you next time, hopefully on Wednesday.